Welcome to Cut the Crop, keeping you in the know about everything you grow. Researchers, growers and other interesting folk delivering insights and information on topics ranging from agronomy to profitability. Brought to you by the Foundation for Arable Research.
Well, welcome to another episode of Cut the Crop. Now this week, you've got a different host, me, Sarah Bierema, filling in for your regular host, of course, Alison Stewart. And really looking forward to being able to host this episode for you because it is FAR's very first regional roundup podcast episode. And now it's time to check in with some arable growers from around the country to see what's been happening on farm and how they've been dealing with lockdown. We start out in the deep south with Steve Wilkins from Arable in Southland. Now, Steve, could you give us a bit of a rundown on how arable farmers in the Southland region have been managing through lockdown and what sort of issues have emerged?
Sarah, it was a lot of uncertainty, I suppose, to begin with, and how things were going to unfold. But so that, of course, there's a lot of seasonal workers, from overseas who assist with harvest and so forth. So some of those took the opportunity to get out of the country while they could, which left a bit of a vacuum for staff for a few days. But it was kind of picked up by other staff becoming available, I guess. So, I guess it wasn't perhaps quite as onerous as we thought it was going to be, but definitely challenging, and having to have people travel separately and so forth, and operating their own vehicle and sticking to that, and the whole hygiene thing. So, it was. It took a bit of getting to grips with, but in the end, the harvest is pretty much done. So, it's not business as usual, but not nearly as bad as some folk have had to deal with.
So, give us a bit of a roundup on the harvest and how things are placed for sowing for next season.
Well, harvest was sort of in South Otago and Southland was kind of mixed, I suppose, and depending on where you were and how your spring was, really had a big bearing on the crop yields and how the harvest went. But North and Southland fared reasonably well, other than being flooded. Some of the river catchments were flooded in early February, just sort of at the beginning of harvest, or in the first couple of weeks of harvest. And then down central Southland way, the wet spring sort of delayed a lot of the spring sowing, and had been wet kind of right through, and a lack of sunshine meant that some of the yields were disappointing. And similarly in South Otago, out towards Clinton and Balclutha, some of the problems. But so very mixed. In terms of autumn sowing for new crops, has been relatively straightforward. We've had a good spell of weather sort of through April, so planting and establishment has been relatively there's been no interruptions really. So yeah.
So, as you were mentioning there, those February floods, it's certainly had its impact, but is things starting to bounce back? Yeah,
it was, looking back now, or some of the areas that were flooded, you wouldn't kind of know there were, other than some fences that still haven't been repaired here and there, but it probably looked a lot worse over the few days the actual flooding was happening, than, from a cropping perspective anyway, than it turned out. And when harvest actually did happen, the damage probably wasn't as bad as it looked. Obviously, there's a lot of, there's some crops and some fields that weren't able to be harvested because of debris and so forth, but not nearly to the extent it probably looked during that flooding.
Thank you so much. Our first guest on the Regional Roundup for FAR's Cut the Crop episode from Arable in Southland. And now we turn to Mid-Canterbury, where in Somerton we are speaking to Stephen Bierema on how things have been in Canterbury. Now, Stephen, could you give us a bit of an understanding how growers have been getting out through the challenges of course, this lockdown, and what sort of issues may have emerged?
I haven't heard a lot of issues. Harvest has been reasonably good. I think arable farmers in general had a good year, a good season. and autumn has been very kind to us. A lot of dry weather. It's a bit dryish, but you can't have it all. But on average, harvests have been reasonably easy. Fortunately, the seed firms have been able to keep on working, and therefore seeding grass seed, getting clover in, getting fine seed in, has been reasonably good. So from what I've heard along the lines is, everybody is up to speed, and basically they used all the lockdown time to get the job done.
Oh, those winter projects already done, so they have nothing to do in winter, Stephen.
No, there's still a lot to go down during the winter. But in reality, everybody is reasonably up to speed, and we're not behind. Sometimes you're getting behind because the weather doesn't cooperate and everything. Yes. But that hasn't happened. And yes, everything is slowed down, but you really see that things are slowing down. But still, the main jobs which have to be done are being done.
That's fantastic. Now talk about harvest and how yields are, and also how sowing's looking going into the new season.
Harvest last year, weather has been, in this area, Mid-Canterbury has been favourable. Although the start of the spring was really reasonably rough. We had some wild weather in the start, and we had some hail, which really worried a lot of farmers because it did a lot of damage. But fortunately, it was so early on in the season that a lot of plants recovered from that. And coming harvest, there was hardly any sign of any damage. So that was positive. So from what I've heard along the way is that on average yield has been good. No record breakers, but good. And in the farming operation, what my experience is that if you can minimize your failings, then you've got a good year.
We should try that every year. Minimising failings. Now, what about sorry, Stephen. The value of irrigation would have been crucial, especially having such a dry season.
Yes. Water is key. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we have got incredible rich soils and are very fertile. But without water, you're limited. And nowadays, you can't afford to have a misharvest because of the drought season. And it doesn't pay the bills. So therefore, irrigation is sort of levels things out and gives you the opportunity to predict in advance what your yields are going to be, plus minus 10%. But that's within reason. And therefore, it just definitely needs the amount of water, need irrigation. The next question is how much, and that's always a tricky one because we try to get more tools available to make decisions when to irrigate, and because we have to take it out of being subjective but more objective.
Absolutely. Now, Stephen, overall, though, weather has been treating ground conditions favourably in establishing of crops.
Yes, yeah. If I look around the district, the grass seeds are popping up, the clovers are popping up, the feed crops are all done. So basically, farmers have for their store lambs, the ones who are doing lambs over winter, and the dairy grazers are waiting for the dairy cows to arrive in a couple of weeks' time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that great report from out of the Mid-Canterbury. Stephen Bierema from Somerton. Now it's time to fly north to Te Awamutu, and of course in the mighty Waikato we have Alan Henderson. Alan, in this regional roundup as part of FAR's Cut the Crop podcast series, would like to find out a little bit about how the Waikato arable farmers have been getting on under lockdown and the major challenges that have emerged out of level 4.
Yes, well, it has been challenging, but in general, life has carried on the farm with the maize silage harvest and the grain harvest carrying on as per normal, with some slight delays in the drier complexes due to COVID-19. But with the fine weather that we've had over the last month or so, harvest has gone well. The yields have not been that great. They've been down 10 to 20%, both in maize silage and the grain yield. And with the dry weather over the summer and the extra usage of the supplement, there looks to be a shortage or potential shortage of grain maize in the Waikato, and definitely maize silage will be well used and possibly in short supply by the end of the winter.
What about the sowing of next season's crops? How's that looking?
At this stage, it's with the conditions they are, and if we have a mild winter, the planting and the new crop will be good, and we'll have some good cover crop yields to be harvested. But what we don't want is a relatively dry winter and another dry summer, and that'll be quite detrimental to any crops that are planted in the spring. So fingers crossed that we do get some consistent rain over winter and through early summer, late summer.
Just talking about the impact of drought on maize silage in terms of the demand, as well as, of course, the dry conditions in the Waikato of growing it. Are you generally seeing a bigger demand for maize silage full stop in terms of growth year on year?
No, it can be quite fickle, depending on the pasture growth. This year in November, there was a lot of grass pasture harvested and conserved. So prior to Christmas, people were very reluctant to commit themselves to buying maize silage. In some cases, the bank wouldn't allow them to have the money to actually forward purchase it. But as the summer has gone on, it was obvious that there was going to be a pasture shortage, and maize silage became difficult to ascertain, and along with that, any silage that was on the free market did go up in price.
So how's things looking into the next month or two in terms of ground conditions? Is it sort of still crystal ball gazing a wee bit?
Yeah, well, we have had some nice rain, and it has got the pasture underway, and it is slowly growing. But we still are a wee bit behind last year, and it's making it a little bit difficult in the stocking regime with the COVID and not able to get stock into the sale or cull cows to the works when you wish. So there is people carrying extra stock, or they can't move stock, which in that case they're using extra feed. So there is a huge potential as we get into October, November, and there could be quite a feed deficit through the mating time for dairy cows.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that wonderful roundup out of the Waikato. Alan Henderson talking to us in the sunshine in Te Awamutu. Now, lastly, we're heading to Hawke's Bay to catch up with Hugh Ritchie from Otani. Now, Hugh, how has, of course, this level 4 lockdown been for the arable growers in Hawke's Bay?
I think level 4 really for most of us has been sort of pretty much business as usual. Obviously, you know, we've had to do the social distancing, and we've incorporated more PPE and sprays through all the vehicles. But especially with the dry up here at the moment, we've been absolutely frantic trying to keep grain and feed and mixes up to farmers needing feed. So it's been pretty essential. We've kept going. Probably the biggest impact has been a lot of our staff have actually got partners that have got essential services, so they've had to do childcare duties, which left us a bit short-handed at times. But no, it's really gone through pretty easily, really. Even the support businesses have been very good at, you know, getting stuff out to us and getting things done. So no, it hasn't really had too much impact at all.
Give us a bit of an update on how harvest has been in terms of yields, and then leading, of course, into sowing for next season.
Well, I think it was sort of a game of two halves. Anything autumn sown was pretty strong, and heavier soils, I think, performed very well if it was sown early, but certainly late sown crops on dry drier soils or lighter soils have really struggled, and the maize crops, I think, just coming out now, certainly anything dry land has been very, very poor yielding. There has been some good yields out on good soils, but generally the dry has really had an impact, especially late season. And obviously resowing has been pretty easy. We haven't had to worry about wet. But again, there's probably not enough moisture in the ground to germinate any autumn sown crops. I mean, we're irrigating the wheat we've got sown in the ground now, irrigating that through to get that underway.
So what sort of issues do you think will be emerging from this drought going through into next season and the establishment of these crops?
I mean, I don't think it's too late yet. I mean, as long as we get some nice rain. I mean, there's supposedly some rain forecast for Sunday, Monday, which should be enough to get things up and away. I mean, there's quite good dews and sort of fogs at night now, which keep things going once they're established. So I think, I don't think there's too much issue there yet. Again, if it then goes really wet and cold, then it might make it difficult for anybody to get things established. But probably most people, I think, are getting things in the ground now while it's dry, and they'll just wait for moisture to come through. And hopefully we don't get a sort of a double take germination.
So Hugh, lastly, how are feed supplies looking in Hawke's Bay and sourcing from around the country and matching up with what's available?
At this stage, we've bought nearly probably 1,100 tonnes of grain in over the last 2 months to make up for people. Certainly all the local grain, I think, is bespoken for, but certainly the fields, I haven't, I've got an order in currently for some more maize, but I haven't been told there's none available yet. So, but it is getting tight. There's no baleage, I don't think. Baleage in Hawke's Bay is very, short. Maize stubble hasn't really started getting baled yet, but that's probably the next thing that will be maybe used with some molasses to create some cow sort of type feed. But I think it's pretty short now. I think the worry is that it's getting cold. If we don't get rain very soon, then I think there will be we'll have a big long winter really if it goes cold from now on, because it's such a widespread area. I mean, the ranges to the coast are all very short, and even Prongahow got sort of 100 and 150 mils of rain 3 weeks ago, and that's even sort of starting to get dry again. So, it's going to be a long winter for some people.
Thank you so much for rounding up the regional roundup. That's Hugh Ritchie from Otane in Hawke's Bay. Now that's the end of this episode for Cut the Crop, the first of which will be hopefully a monthly regional roundup, catching up with the members of Foundation for Arable Research. Make sure you check out the other episodes, a part of the Cut the Crop series. I've been your host, Sarah Perriam, and thoroughly enjoyed standing in for Alison Stewart.
Thanks for tuning in to Cut the Crop, presented to you by FAR. If you'd like to know more about any of the topics discussed or have any suggestions for future topics, go to www.cutthecrop.co.nz.